So, Illinois and much of the Midwest has long been rumored to be home to a particularly large group of birds. These birds have been termed Thunderbirds. Rumors of these large birds have been around for a very long time and go back at least as far as the early Native American populations. The early native populations of Illinois were certainly no strangers to these birds. Two giant petroglyphs of these birds once decorated the limestone bluffs of the Mississippi River near Alton, Illinois. These petroglyphs are believed to have been created by the Cahokia. The Cahokia was a large advanced civilization of Native American mound builders. They primarily lived on the banks of the Mississippi River until their civilization started to disappear about the 13th century. The largest North American earth mound was built by the Cahokia, and it still stands today just outside of St. Louis, Missouri.
We went there not too long ago, and it was a pretty interesting sight to go see.
Yeah, definitely an interesting sight. The mound that is there is massive.
Sometimes I wonder why they built those mounds.
Well, according to the museum and site that's there, they likely built these mounds as a form of worship or some sort of a temple.
That makes sense.
We've had an opportunity to visit some of the mounds in other parts of the Midwest here. One of those mounds is just outside of Evansville, Indiana, called Angel Mounds. These mound sites all over the Midwest are very interesting and certainly worth a trip or a visit. The folklore of the Cahokia is filled with many fantastic creatures, and several large petroglyphs of serpents and dragons and monstrous birds have been found dotting the cliffs of the Mississippi River around Alton, Illinois. It is believed that these petroglyphs served a religious purpose and also served as a warning for travelers and enemies as they were entering into the Cahokia territory. The most famous of these petroglyphs is known as the Piasa, which translates to the bird that devours men. That doesn't sound ominous at all.
Lovely.
That doesn't sound ominous at all, does it? This is a massive petroglyph, and it's etched into the limestone cliffs just outside of Alton, Illinois. There was a early explorer in this area who was a Jesuit missionary. His name is Pierre Marquette, and he described these petroglyphs in his journal in 1673 as he was exploring this area.
Here's an excerpt from his journal. We saw upon one of them 2 painted monsters, which at first made us afraid, and upon which the boldest savage dared not long to rest their eyes. They were as large as a calf. They had horns on their heads like those of a deer, a horrible look, red eyes, a beard like a tiger's, a face somewhat like a man's, a body covered with scales, and so long a tail that it winds around the body, passing above the head and going back between the legs, ending in a fish's tail. That's quite a combination of animals there.
It is, and it actually, if you see the petroglyph or a drawing of the petroglyph, it looks like very much like a hybrid reptilian type of dragon or bird.
Yeah, it is very unusual.
The Cahokia tribe called these birds Thunderbirds, and they called them that because of the sound that they made when they were flapping their giant wings. It's been said that the flap of their wings made the ground reverberate. These birds were considered to be highly intelligent. Many of the tales of the Plains Native Americans talk about these creatures alternating between preying on and oftentimes helping the tribe in some way. According to a story that was published by John Russell, the creature depicted on the petroglyphs was a huge bird that lived in the cliffs. Russell claimed that this creature attacked and devoured people in nearby Indian villages, and these birds often showed up after war to feast on the corpses. In fact, it probably was the war and the corpses that gave the birds a taste for human flesh. Legend has it that a local Indian chief by the name of Owatoga managed to slay the monster using a plan that was given to him in a dream by the Great Spirit. Jessica, you did some research on Owatoga. Can you share that?
Yeah, Owatoga, he seemed like a very spiritual man. He had spent time fasting and praying before he had this dream from the Great Spirit, and the Great Spirit basically showed him how to take down the monster. It showed him that there was a special place under the wings where there were no scales, and that if their braves shot arrows at one spot, then they would be able to take down this beast. So Oatoga gathered some of his bravest men, and they went to confront the creature. Oatoga stood outside of the cave, and he banged a drum to try to get the creature's attention, while his men hid. And when the monster presented itself, they shot him under the wing, as he'd been shown in the dream, with poison arrows, and they were able to take him down.
Russell claimed that the mural that was painted by the Indians was painted as a commemoration of this heroic event. The Thunderbird figure is not only prominent in the Cahokia, it is also prominent through many of the other Plains tribes as well. This includes the Lakota. The Lakota believe that the birds embodied the Supreme Being, and that the creature actually helped to create all of the living things here on Earth. The Algonquin believe that the Thunderbirds control the upper world, while the underworld is controlled by the underwater panther or the great horned serpent. The Thunderbirds protect mankind by throwing lightning at the underworld creatures, keeping them at bay. Other Algonquin legends teach that the Thunderbirds are ancestors to the human race and played an important role in the creation of the universe.
The Menominee of northern Wisconsin have a legend that tells of a great mountain that floats in the western sky. The Thunderbirds dwell there and control the rain. They love a good fight, and they revel in deeds of greatness. They are sworn enemies to the great horned snake, and fight to prevent these underworld creatures from overrunning the earth and devouring mankind. They are believed to be messengers of the great sun himself.
There are also legends among the Ojibwe. These legends speak of the Thunderbirds being created for the purpose of fighting the underwater spirits. They also believe that humans could be punished by the Thunderbirds for breaking moral rules. The Thunderbirds were believed to have lived in the four directions, and were known to arrive with the other birds in the springtime, which was considered to be the season of the underwater spirits, and migrate south after the end of that season.
The Winnebago believed that the Thunderbirds could grant humans with great abilities, and the man who fasted and received a vision of a Thunderbird would become a war chief.
There's also legends among the Sioux. The Sioux believe that, like the many other tribes, that the Thunderbirds play a role in protecting mankind, particularly from dangerous reptilian underworld creatures. It's clear from these stories that the Plains tribes both respected and feared the Thunderbird. I find it interesting, as we've kind of read all those stories, that they're all very similar, that they all talk about the Thunderbirds protecting mankind from these great horned snakes, or these underwater spirits or underworld spirits.
We've already talked a little bit about how the idea of a Thunderbird is scary, but when you think about them this way, as protectors, I kind of like that a little bit better. I'd rather have a big scary bird as my protector looking out for me than to think of them as trying to devour me.
Yeah, that's certainly a more comforting thought.
But then I wonder what exactly are the reptiles they're talking about that are constantly trying to devour us from below.
Yeah, that's not a comforting thought at all. So we go from comforting to not comforting.